Hello all, welcome to the today's session. So in this session, let's see what are the things that we're going to learn and let's have a quick recap. Right. So in the previous session, we have learned about the following things where we have clearly understood about the comparison operators, how will they work, how the comparison between null and undefined actually work. We have understood about what is conditional branching, what is if statement, what if else, what is else if, and also we have seen about conditional operator, which is nothing but the question mark. And also we have seen about this logical operators where we have three different logical operators or and not, and we have seen how different they work with each other. Now, in this session, let's focus on two important things, which is known as nullish coalescing operator. So, the symbol for this nullish coalescing operator is nothing but, let me write it, two question marks and loops. Let's see what are the different kind of loops that we have for this respective. Wait a minute. For this respective JavaScript. So, without any delay, let's go ahead and let's start our respective session. So, for that, let me go back to my VS Code. Let me create a file. I'll say nullish and loops.js. Right. I've created a file for this respective class, and yeah. So we have this operator known as nullish coalescing. Coalescing operator where it is written with the format of double question mark altogether. Now coming back to this one very important thing where this nullish coalescing operator is a new addition to this respective JavaScript. So whenever you are working with the old browsers, you require polyfills for that. So what is going to be polyfills and all of these things? It's a huge component. I'll come to that polyfills at advanced part of JavaScript. So in this entire session of the JavaScript, we'll be focusing on one very important thing, covering the JavaScript from top to end. That will be our major thing. And in some other sessions, we'll be having some, in a new altogether session, we'll be having some advanced JavaScript things. How do we write a logic in the JavaScript? What are these polyfills? How can we prepare for advanced JavaScript interviews altogether? That we can prepare in the for next slot of sessions altogether. Right. Now let's go ahead and understand what is this about this nullish coalescing operator in this respective session. So one very important thing we need to understand is as it treats, wait a minute, as it treats null and undefined. Similarly, we'll use a special term here because this nullish coalescing operator will use the same kind of thing. So we'll do one thing for the kind of purpose. We'll say that a value, or let me write it this thing to a value. Let's have this thing, a value defined when it's neither. Whenever we say that a value is defined, whenever it is neither a null or undefined. A value is defined, or let's say, or we'll say that a value defined, the term, let's say if someone says his value is defined, we consider that value is neither a null nor a undefined altogether. Now in other words, we can say that this nullish coalescing operator returns the first argument if it's not null or undefined. On a simple level, to get a grasp on how does this given particular nullish coalescing operator would work, this double question mark returns, or this nullish coalescing operator returns the first argument if it's not null or undefined. Otherwise, second, to be more precise. Otherwise, second one. So this nullish coalescing operator isn't anything something completely new. It is just a nice syntax. Uh, is a nice syntax to get first defined value of, or of the two. Let's say we have two variables. If we want to get what is the what variable that is defined, then we'll be using this nullish coalescing operator altogether. So the syntax would be like this: a simple, I'll say value is equal to some A double colon B. So this knowledge collecting operator will return either A or B, depends upon whether they are defined or not. If A is defined, this will be returned. If A is not defined, then B will be returned by this respective operator altogether as a result. So let me do this one thing. I can say is let user. So here I have just declared. I haven't initialized any kind of a data into this respective what I would call into this respective thing. So I'll simply say uh, console.log user some like anonymous. Now what I want is like if this respect to user variable is defined, then this will be the result. In console log, we'll be getting the user or data that is present in the inside the user variable altogether. On the same way, we have this given particular thing known as an anonymous. Like if user is not yet defined, then anonymous is something that has been defined. So we'll be getting this respective data. So for this case, let me run the code. I'll say code, sorry, not code. I'll say node nalish and loops.js. Okay, wait, what is the output? Okay, sorry. So I need to include underscores. If I have gaps specifically, I need to underscore. Wait a minute. There's a problem with the name itself. Let me change the name of the file. File name, sorry. Rename. Null and loop. Oh, no special things. Null and loop. Let's name our thing. Let me say loop.js. Right. Now I can clearly observe this nullish correlation operator is returning the answer as anonymous because user is not defined. It is declared. No thing has been included in it because here user will define undefined. Sorry, user will store undefined. Here we simply declared it. So in a declared variable, if there is no data, by default JavaScript includes this data known as undefined. Nullish collaging operator will not entertain these kind of things because in the definition itself, this operator returns the first argument if it's not a null or undefined. So here in this case, the first argument itself is a null. So it returns the second argument. That's what I have written in the definition here. That's what I have written in the definition here. Right? Let's say we have this thing. Let's take this basic example. Let me take this another example. I'll say let first name is something known as null. Let last name is something known as null. And let nickname is something known as coder. Console.log. I'll say first name, last name, nickname. And also add something known as anonymous. So one very important thing we need to hear to understand that is, let's say we have this thing of first name, last name, and nickname who are not defined, they are null. One is defined. One is having some kind of data that is present inside of it, right? So I can say this operator, or let me run the code first. Let me run the code. Right. You can clearly see. Let me run the code. Yeah. You can clearly see here this double question mark operator or nullish collaging operator is showing us the output as coder because in the nickname we have defined some data. So this operator, nullish collaging operator, what I can say, this returns first. I can say this is or the operator that returns the first defined variable. This defines the first defined variable. Always remember this double nullish coalescing operator will always return the first defined variable for us. This is about nullish coalescing operator. Now, as if you can remember in the previous session, we have seen that we have seen this one thing which is known as OR, not PR, this OR, because it we have found that it returns first truthy value. First truthy value. I repeat, in the previous session we have seen this OR returns first truthy value altogether. Give me a minute. Yeah, let's go ahead. Give me a minute. Yeah, first truthy value, whereas this operator, nullish coalescing operator, first defined value or first defined variable or first defined value altogether. So if you can clearly observe these two statements, the OR operator can be used in the same way as we use this nullish coalescing operator. So even if you take this same example, let me copy the same example. Instead of having nullish coalescing operator, this is very important thing that we need to understand at this point. Right. Right. If you can clearly observe, you'll see both the values of this given protected console logs would be same. You'll see coder. Even the first console log is getting the coder and second console log is getting the coder. But the difference, primary difference between nullish coalescing operator is it returns the first defined variable, but OR returns first truthy value altogether. Right? Historically, this OR operator was there first because nullish coalescing operator is a recent addition for the language. So it's been, I can say, yeah, it's been since this OR operator has been there since the beginning of this respective thing in the JavaScript. So developers were using this OR operator way more long time than this new operator altogether. So the important difference we need to understand is, always remember, this nullish coalescing operator will return first defined value. Instead of variable, I should return first defined value. OR returns first truthy value. In other words, let me write it here. In OR operator, I can say, doesn't distinguish between false, zero, and empty string, and null and undefined. Null and undefined. Because all of them, a false, all of them are falsy values for OR operator. Falsy values for OR operator. Right? For example, let me take this simple example. I'll say let height is equal to 0. Let's have this thing like this. I'll say console.log height of 100. Let me comment this thing out. Right. And I'll say console.log of height 100. Yes. Now let's run the code and let's see the code. Yeah. Now I can clearly observe this OR operator. When we are using OR operator, it returns truthy value. It only focuses on true or false. That's it. But coming back to this nullish coalescing, it returns first defined value. First defined value. So this is the actual difference between OR operator and this, because people used to show this kind of an example and tell both are working fine. Both are same, but they are not same. They're completely different. So one need to understand the primary difference between this. This can be a classic interview question, because one of the interviews for my friend, they have asked the same question. So they've asked, okay, OR is also behaving like this as a nullish coalescing operator. Why do we require this thing? Because this is the difference. This returns first defined value. This returns first truthy value. That's a major difference that we need to observe it. So Right. Now let's see the thing. Yeah. Now coming back to this given particular precedence, uh, and yeah, coming back to this or and this nullish collision operator have same precedence. Have same precedence. Have same precedence. They both are, I think, around it's 3 or 4. I don't exactly remember, but yes. So one very important thing is that just like this entire height kind of a thing, the null operator is this will be executed before the equal to operator and the remaining operator altogether. That's how this actually thing works. Now, one another important thing I just want to mention is um, using knowledge collation operator with and or using this respective knowledge collation operator with and or. If you combine those things, it can cause a mishap. In majority of the cases, this is prohibited behavior. This entire thing that we are actually seeing here, it is a prohibited behavior for the sake of these things. For example, let me give a simple example. I'll say let x is equal to 1 and 2 double quotation 3. So due to safety reasons, these knowledge correction operators should not be utilized with these two operators unless precedence is explicitly um, is forbidden. Let me write it forbidden. Unless the precedence, sorry, unless the precedence is explicitly specified with parenthesis. This is important. So whenever you try to use this has a severe backdrops because it is clearly saying this and this nullish correlation operator cannot be mixed with. So we need to use some kind of a parenthesis. If you have this parenthesis altogether, then it's fine. Then it's fine. It's always good to have with this respect to parenthesis. Without parenthesis, it would cause um, major issues altogether. So that would about this respect to thing known as a nullish colliding operator altogether. Now let me go back. Yeah. Now let's see what is meant by loops altogether. So specifically when we talk about those loops, um, right. So now let's continue with this point of this thing known as loops. So yes. So specifically when you want some part of the code to be repeated, for n number of times, we'll use this concept known as loops. We'll use this concept known as loops. Now let's try to see what are the different type of loops that are present in JavaScript. In JavaScript, we have while loop, we have do while loop, and we also have for loop. These three different type of loops that are actually present in JavaScript. So let's see what each loop offers us and what can we go with the for the loops altogether. So one very important thing, let's go ahead with this thing known as while loop altogether. So I'll say while loop. So the situation or this entire thing would be like this, or the syntax would be like this: condition, where you have this respective code, and you should also have this one very important thing. This code is actually known as loop body. We need to have our increment or decrement code. The code that is resident written inside this flower package is known as loop body, and the final important thing that every loop should have is this thing, right? We need to have this called as base. So we need to have this something known as base. Now let's write this entire thing. Let's write this entire thing. So for example, I'll say let I is equal to something known as 5. So I want to print hello world 5 times. So I'll say console.log hello world. So what I'll do is, now, so the same line of code is actually being copy pasted 5 times. Now, if I run the code, I'll get this respective thing known as an output. But instead, I want some mechanism that will print me hello world 5 times, but I don't copy paste the code like this in my terminal. I'll only write hello world for one time, and that mechanism should print this given particular thing, should run this one single line of code. This should run this one single line of code 5 times. How can we do it? There comes this given particular point known as an while loop. So I'll create a sample variable. So I'll create a sample variable here. I name it as I is equal to something known as 5. It's not dot. Now after this sample variable, I'll write a simple thing where I'll have this mechanism known as while, where I'll write a condition that, or yeah, I'll write a condition, or before writing the condition, I'll mention the loop body, which is nothing but I want to print this hello world. Hello world. I want to print this hello world. But how many times you want to print? Another important thing we need to mention is the condition. So what does this condition, or what is the point of this given particular condition? It is pretty straightforward and very simple. It is nothing but this condition will determine how many times this loop or this code that is present inside the flower brackets will run. So I will say if I less than or equal to 0. I less than or equal to 0, or I less than 0 to be more precise. To be more precise. So I have this small logic where I have this sample variable, where using this sample variable, sorry, we create the loop, or we control the loop. We control the loop. So creation of any sample variable for a given particular loop is that using that sample variable, we can control the loop. We can control how many times the loop should run. We can control how good the loop should run. We can control when the loop should be stopped. We can control different aspects of the loop, different aspects of this entire mechanism altogether, right? So basing of this given particular condition, I have written the condition while I is equal to 5, while I is equal to 5, I want this loop to be executed. I want this loop to be executed. Instead of this, let me write it down. Not this, sorry. I greater than 0. Yeah. It's fine. So until unless this condition is true, this entire code will go on and implement the same code. That is loop code. Now, as we have created a sample variable, based upon that sample variable, we are running the loop. But one very important thing we need to understand is we are having some kind of a condition, like this condition is actually known as stopping condition. Whatever condition we are writing is a stopping condition, which is nothing but this condition will help the loop to stop. So we need to manipulate this sample variable such that this sample variable will match the value here, will match the condition here. So for that, I have this thing known as a base. If you can clearly remember the syntax, we have this condition where this condition is a very much important thing to make this entire loop go through and stop. But from a sample variable where we are using it to control the loop, we need to actually make sure the sample variable reaches this condition altogether. Then only the loop will stop. Otherwise, loop will be infinite times, or loop will be running infinite times. So it is just a waste of time. That's why what I'll be doing is I'll write the base. I'll write a base. What is the base? I simply say I minus minus. So I have base condition. This is my base fundamental point. So I'll create a sample variable. Based upon this variable, I'll make a condition. And to meet this condition, I'll write the base. So everything is interlinked. So first, whenever you defined a sample variable altogether, based upon that sample variable, you write a condition. So the primary objective of this respective condition is it should stop the loop. it should stop the loop. Now we have a sample variable, and our agenda is how can we achieve from, or how can we come from 5 to 0. That will be tackled by base. That will be tackled by base. So instead of this, let me do this prefix or postfix. Anything is fine. So initially the I value is, or sample variable is having data of 5. So the condition is if 5 greater than 0, if this condition is actually true, then I'll execute this code. Execute this code. So initially what happens is, like, let me say, in initial run or initial iteration, we can call it. So what is meant by iteration? Iteration is nothing but one loop, which is nothing but one complete execution of loop, where in words I can say from start till the base. If loop body executed, then it is iteration, which is nothing but from this starting point, inside the loop body, from the starting point till this base. Always remember, this base should be present at the last point. Till this base, if the code exactly runs for one time, that is known as one iteration. So here, what we want to do is, here initially the value of I is 5. So the condition is 5 greater than 0, which is nothing but this is completely true, which is nothing but initial iteration, or I can say first iteration. Altogether. So once we have this respect to first iteration, where I value is actually equal to the value of 5. So this condition is actually true, where this indeed will be becoming 5 greater than 0. This condition will be true. So we have this hello world printed here. Once this hello world printed here, what we are doing, we are decrementing the value. So the 5, we are doing this 5 minus 1. Now again, this I value is becoming 4. So at the start of the first iteration, we have I value as 5. But as we go forward, at the end of the same iteration, we have I value has been decreased. Now slowly you can clearly observe, in second iteration, where I value is 4. I value is 4. What it does, it again compares 4 greater than 0. 4 greater than 0. This is a true value. So again, hello world, this condition is true, hello world will be printed, and minus I. Then I value is again reduced to another one. This would be value of 3. So by end of second iteration, I value has become to the value of 3. So on, if you can clearly observe, by fifth iteration, I value would be equal to the value of 0. Not fifth, but it's sixth, right? Then 0 greater than 0 condition will arrive. So in this case, this condition fails. So then this loop will not be executed. The code that is present inside will not be executed. So the same kind of a thing will happen here. So let's run the code, and I'll say, right, you can clearly see 5 times. First time, second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time. Right, the first iteration I is equal to 5. The condition here works, 5 greater than 0. The condition will be true. Once this condition is true, you will print hello world. Once this hello world got printed, we reduce the I value. 5 minus 1. Then at the end, I equal to 4. So on. We have to have these 3 important things in a given particular loop. If you miss this one single line, then there is no point. If you miss this one single line, then this variable, where the sample variable that we have created to control the loop, will not decrease from the value of 5. We'll be still staying at the value of 5. So as long as this condition is true, this loop will be executed. So when you miss this base, I value remains 5. it will not be 0. It will be 5 until unless we change. So until then, this loop will continuously run. That is what meant by infinite loop. That is what meant by infinite loop. So the most important thing we need to understand is this base is very important. This condition is very important. This condition, this base are two important things. Give whatever sample variable you want, but after giving, use the same sample variable to control the running of the loop, to control the running of the loop altogether. So that's how this entire while loop will be working for. That's how this entire while loop will be working for altogether. So even some people I have seen without these curly braces, they'll write the code. They'll simply mention while I greater than 0, they'll simply write console.log minus minus I. So when you're writing loop, having these kind of a braces is very good, even if you are having one single line of code. So write this. So even though we have one single line of loop body, it is very much important. It is very much important. So if you can ask here, you don't see any kind of a base, but you can clearly see the variable that is helping us to control the loop is getting decreased. Is getting decreased. So that's how this entire loop concept will be actually working for. Similarly, we have this thing known as an we write it. Similarly, we have this thing known as an do while loop. Do while loop altogether. So what is meant by this thing known as a do while loop altogether? So the syntax would be like this. Right. The syntax would be looking like this. I'll say do. We have this loop body inside. This is entire loop body you will be having. And you have while. Have condition here. And you have condition here. So the sample would be like this. I'll say let I is equal to something known as 0. For example, let's take this thing. A sample variable will be created. I'll mention it as do. I'll say console.log hello world. And I'll simply say I minus minus. And I'll write while, and my condition is sorry, not I minus I minus, I plus plus. My condition is I greater than 5. Now in this respect to do while loop, first this entire thing will be executed, then the condition met. So for example, let me run the code. Okay. Hello world, we are having any kind of hello world. Give me a minute. Sorry, here the condition is, I have written a wrong condition. As long as I less than 5, I want to execute this respective code. Let's run the code. Right. If you can clearly observe, hello world once, twice, thrice, 4 times, 5 times. So this is how the loop will actually run. So in do while loop, as long as we have seen this while loop, first condition will be evaluated, then only we'll execute. In while loop, the condition will be evaluated first, and then the content, if the condition is true, then only we'll go ahead and execute the loop body. But here in the do while loop, let me mention it here. Here in do while loop, we what I can say, we execute the loop body and then check the code and check the condition. The condition check has been moved below, like this. Condition check has been moved to this point, the belowest point altogether. So the loop will first execute the body, then check the condition while it's truthy or not. So first execution will be happening. Then it will check the condition. If this condition is true, again this execution will actually happen. If this condition is false, but still this loop or this do will be executed once. So here, if I say I greater than 5, so I want whenever if I value greater than 5, then only I want to execute this code. That's what we have learned about while loop. If I greater than 0, then only I'll execute the loop body. But in this case, first the body will be executed. First the body will be executed. Initially I value is 0. So first this will be executed. So let me run. You'll see first this console log has been executed and I++ has been done. Even after I++ here, by the end of this 73 line, you can clearly see I value will be increment to 1. 0 plus 1, 1. So then condition check happens. Here, the condition check would be 1 greater than 5. This condition fails. That's why you don't see again this entire do loop or do while loop executing again. This is how this do while loop actually work for. Let's go back to this next loop, which is known as for loop. We have this thing known as an for loop. It is a bit interesting and straightforward. So let me write it like this. I'll say the syntax of the for loop would be like this, where we'll mention all the things. Begin, we'll mention the condition, we'll mention the step, and we'll mention only loop body. Probably majority of the people in JavaScript will be using for loop or while loop. They might not use do while loop, but as per a knowledge purpose, it is very much important for us to understand what are the different types of loop that are present in the JavaScript. Now in the same thing, if you can clearly observe, if you can clearly see this while loop, the syntax, we have a sample variable. Based upon that, we'll write a condition and we'll have a base condition altogether. This is the basic thing that we write. But if you can clearly observe for a while loop, let's take back this given particular example. We have a variable created here. We have a condition written here. We have this base condition written inside the loop body altogether. One very important thing or interesting thing is these three different parts, if we combine together, the sample variable creation, this condition, and this base, which is actually known as step. All these three for a while loop, for a for loop will be present in one single line. Will be present in one single line. Okay. So let's see how does that thing actually work. Sorry. So I'll say for I is equal to 0, I less than 3, I plus plus. So all these respective things, whatever we have written here, this sample variable, condition, and this step, the base, all three are present here. You can say let. If I hasn't been declared properly previously, then yes, I haven't been declared. It is in comments. So leave it. So if I haven't been declared properly, we have to initialize it here. If previously it is in this format, if it is already let I, if it is already in this format, this code would be sufficient. No redeclaration is required. But if it's not the case, let. This is the thing that it happens. Now I'll simply say console dot. Just focus on this loop body. I'll say hello world. The best thing. So while writing this respect to loops, majority of them prefers for loop because it is very handy, because we can write entire details in one single line altogether. That's why we use this given particular for loop more. Now coming back to this given particular thing, now if I run the code, let me say, I can clearly see 3 times. If I say 5, right. So initially I value is 0. So this condition works. Once this condition works, this will be executed. Once loop body execution happens, then only this I++ will be executed. So this happens only at the start. Initialization or this entire declaration part, this I is equal to 0 part is actually happening only at the start of the loop. Once it is done, second thing is condition check. Once condition check is also done, it is true. If condition yields the value of true, Then it goes to this loop body and execute the loop. And again, it goes up and do the third step, stepping up or having this I++. So this is the cycle. Then again, once I++ is done, condition check. If condition is true, again execute the body. Go for step. Go for step. This is how this entire thing of loop actually work, for loop actually work. So condition check is true, it executes the loop body and go for step. This is a standard point. This is a standard point. If condition is true in the for loop, it executes the loop body and then this I++ or I minus minus or something else which we have written, the base condition or the statement, that will be implemented. That will be directly implemented. This is how this entire for loop will be working upon. Right? So this is the beginning, this is the condition, this is the body, and this is the stepping up thing altogether. Right? Clear? So let me, if right, the begin executes once. Let me write it. Begin executes once, and then it iterates between condition to loop body to step and again condition check. So this initially happens, then condition check happens. If this is true, loop body will be executed and step will be incremented. I++ will be incremented. Then once this step is done, again we go to condition. If condition is true, we execute this code. Again go for step. If condition is false this time, then we stop the running of the code. We stop the running of the code. This is how this entire thing is actually being implemented. This is how this entire thing is actually being implemented specifically here. And another important thing is whenever you declare such kind of a sample variables for only restricted to loop, you cannot access them outside. I cannot say console log of I. You'll see I'll get an error. It is mentioning I is not defined. The one very important thing we need to understand is when you define or when you initialize a sample variable for a loop inside the loop, you can access only inside the loop. Outside the loop, you cannot access. Which is nothing but inside this flower brackets, you can access this variable I. But if I try to do outside of this flower brackets or outside of this respective loop, then this doesn't work. Then this doesn't work. If you want this to be worked, you can keep like this. Declare this given particular variable here. Then now you'll see that can be accessed. You see that can be accessed. So here the variable is outside the loop, so we can access outside the loop. But as in the previous case, if the variable is initialized at the inside of the loop, then it is we can only access that given particular variable inside the loop. We cannot access the variable outside the loop. If I try to access it, I'll get some error. Now, right. Another interesting part is it is not mandatory to mention all of these three things. It is not mandatory to mention all of these three things. We can remove these things. We can remove these things if we have the code like this. If let's say if I have initialized a variable, a sample variable like this, there is no point for me to write the code here because it's already been declared. It's already been declared, so it's not that case. Similarly, I can also remove this thing. I can also remove this step. This also works because by default, if you remove the beginning part, it's already been declared right here. The same thing will be utilized by the JavaScript. We have a variable known as I, which is actually equal to the value of 0, is present here. Will be included here itself by the JavaScript. Even in the code, we haven't mentioned the beginning part of the for loop, but JavaScript will take this given particular line and we'll use it here. That's some intelligent thing of this given particular JavaScript. Okay. Similarly, we can remove the step part. As this makes this respect to a loop identical. Loop very identical. If you remove the step part, include it inside here. Include it here. If you remove step part, it's always necessary that we include this step part because without this, your loop will run infinite times. Waste of time. Right? Similarly, what I can say, You can also remove this thing. Okay, you can also remove this thing. You can remove this thing. This entire your loop can be completely empty. But this is an example of infinite loop. Because if loop is running infinite times, it's just wasting your computer resources. That's it. Nothing much more than that. Nothing much more than that. So this is about the respective for loop altogether. Now coming back to this respective thing, where we have two important statements, which is known as let me do one thing. So let's say if I want to break the loop, or if I want to stop the loop, how can I do it? Similarly, uh, if I want to skip the loop for two times. Skip the loop two times means I can say for two times, I don't want the loop body to be executed. For two times, I don't want loop body to be executed. How can I do these two things? So first things first, if you ever want to stop a loop, we have this statement known as break. Similarly, if we want to skip per few iterations of a given particular loop, we have a given particular statement known as continue. Continue. So this break is a directive. This continue is also a directive. So I can simply say this given particular thing. I'll say let sum is equal to something known as 0. And I'll say while true. I'm not writing any kind of condition. I'm making this loop very easy. I'm not writing any kind of a condition based upon the sample variable that we have created. I just simply want this loop should be continuously running. No condition mentioned means infinite times. No condition mentioned, no step mentioned. I repeat. Condition and step mentioned. No issues. Loop will run infinite times. So here the condition is simply true. There is no such kind of a condition. There is no such thing like sum greater than should be 0 or sum should be negative number. I haven't mentioned any kind of such kind of a conditions here in this given particular space. So this loop runs infinite times. But the thing is, I don't want the loop to be run for infinite times. So I'll say let value is equal to sorry. I'll say something like 23, for example. And I'll say if not value brick, and I'll say sum is equal to sum plus value. So as we already know this modifying the statements, I'll remove this entire thing. Right, like this. And I'll simply say, sorry, console log sum. Console log sum. So what I have written the code here. Specifically, I have initialized the value with this respect to thing known as n23 or some sort of a data. Now once what I want to do is if this 23 value, when mentioned here, is not at all truth value, then this should be breaking. This should be breaking. Which is nothing but I have added a negation thing, which is nothing but a not symbol. What does this given particular thing means? Let me explain it very briefly. I'll say value, and it means that if this value is truth value, this not symbol will convert into false value. This not symbol will convert into false value, right? If this value is 0, it converts into truth value. This thing will be converted into truth value. Now what if this variable value is storing some kind of a true value, then this condition false. Let me explain. Value is having true value or truth, then condition fails. if value is equal to 0, which is nothing but a false value, then condition becomes true. Then condition becomes true. So if I add this instead of 0, you'll say, uh, you'll see this output as 0. But if this is something greater than 0, I'll hit an infinite loop. You can clearly observe I'm hitting an infinite loop because this we are currently this while loop will still be in the format of infinite format. So this will be continuously running. You'll see this entire thing is running, right? To stop it, Command C. Oh, sorry. Let me close the terminal. Let me reopen the terminal. Right. Now the loop has stopped. So that's how, or let me add something. Console log high. I'll show you how does a infinite loop actually work. Like, can you see? The high is going on, going on, going on, going on for n number of time. High is going on, going on, going on. You don't see these things visible, but if you scroll up, you have a lot of highs, a lot of highs. I'm scrolling down this thing. I close it. So one very important thing I need to mention, the way I'm writing this condition is that if this value variable is having truth, then this condition will fail. So if this value variable is holding some kind of a false value, then this loop will be breaking. Then this loop will be breaking. That's what this entire thing is actually meant. Sorry. Now let's go ahead for this given particular thing now is in continue statement. Continue statement. So give me a minute.